Welcome back to the Thriving Love Podcast, the podcast that challenges the status quo so couples can thrive as their most authentic selves. So today, if you're watching this, you will see that we are actually in my office. For the first time, I am recording my podcast in person, and I am so excited. And today on the show, we have Norma Montenegro. She is a licensed therapist focusing on couples therapy and the LGBTQ community. So Norma, welcome. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Before we get started on what you do, how did you get started in this work and what inspired you to do all this?
I think there's such a need for focusing on mental health. And ever since I was little, I really wanted to help heal my community. I'm Mexican, bilingual and bicultural. And I think that I really just wanted to focus on how to help my community, how to heal a lot of the stigmas that come with being a woman of color. So I literally wanted to do this always, even when I was 9. So
what was your, were you just out of college knowing that you were going to start this, or was there a moment that you were that happened in your personal life that got you
So I had
inspired?
a very non-traditional route to becoming a therapist. It took me 8 years to do college. I moved out when I was 18. I didn't really have a ton of guidance on the journey for college. My parents were extremely supportive, but didn't know how to navigate the world, right? Being from Mexico, they didn't really have all of the ways to get a master's, to become a therapist. So it took me a little while, but I got there, and really it's what I've always wanted to do. So I'm just so glad.
Did you have mentors? How did you figure that out?
Yeah, so I really think that women are so incredible, right? We uplift each other, we support each other. So I had several mentors that really took me by the hand, guided me. I've always wanted to work in addiction or behavioral psychology. And so I had a couple of phenomenal women who really mentored me and kind of guided me into how to get into this field. So I really believe in, and that's why I'm here as well, to build other people up, to spread education and to help each other. There's so many stigmas, so many places where we don't belong. It's important to really build each other up and pull each other up.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think that we have been operating in this way of everybody has competition.
Right.
And, especially in a place like LA, I feel like I've seen it a lot where, who can help me versus how can we just build genuine connections?
Right.
So have you found that community here in LA for yourself, or have you built it yourself? How has that process been?
I think it's so interesting that you bring up that point. I think society has really shifted, and we'll probably talk about this, right? When we talk about, sexual wants and pleasure and what it's like to be a woman in her own body. I think society has really shifted in that adversary perspective and having women be more of, support systems for each other and empowering each other. So I think community it's allowed me to survive some of the things that life has thrown my way.
Yeah.
And I think women have held me up, have at times literally, at times figuratively, but community is everything. So I have community in Orange County, I have community in LA, but I'm always striving to create more connections and more community. We need each other.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't have the words for what we're looking for, and a girlfriend will come in and support you and kind of guide you, and it's really great.
I love that also because, as we're going to talk about infidelity and stuff, where there's so much noise on the internet today where it's so black or white mindset.
Sure.
I think community can make you, one, feel less alone when you are in the messy middle of figuring out if you should stay or go.
Right.
And offer you a whole different soft landing place to figure that out.
Right.
Without judgment.
Right. And without judgment, that's the key, right? Even just a safe space to come in and say, listen, I'm not sure that just staying or going are the only options. What else is there?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how has that been with your clients? Because do they come and they say, my partner cheated on me, I know I should leave, or are they searching for that third option?
Right. So a little bit about myself. So I've been a therapist about 14 years. And like I said, I've really noticed the shift lately. It used to be very black and white. What limits can I put on my relationship to help me heal from this? Do I need them to cancel their Instagram or get off social media, or do I need to look at their phone? And now it's really, what do we look at? How do we analyze what's happened so that we can have that third option? I think the more that ethical non-monogamy, the more that, non-traditional ways of loving each other emerge, the more power these couples have to heal. Wow. And it hasn't always been the case. So I'm here for it. I support it. And I just think it's so wonderful.
I love that because that's what I do with my couples. It's how can we look at the reason behind the action first and foremost? It's so easy to just judge based on the initial emotion, the initial reaction that we have is
the hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Do you feel like the people are coming to you now with that awareness already of, I know that my partner did something that really, really hurt me, and I want to understand it, versus I'm just sitting in that hurt and
Right.
can't look past that?
Right. I think that's a really complex perspective, right? So unfortunately, we have grown up with, all of us have grown up with just extreme heteronormative, almost like punitive ideas about sex and what we want. And so there's a lot of shame
Yeah.
that these couples carry, right? So women, and I say that because predominantly it is women, come in thinking like, I didn't do enough.
Yeah.
I couldn't, satisfy my husband. And those are just kind of
Damn.
patriarchal, historical issues that really weigh couples down.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to openly say, maybe we didn't talk about pleasure, maybe we didn't talk about what we both wanted.
Yeah.
And so traditional heterosexual relationships will come to me with those heteronormative stereotypes and that damage, that trauma,
Yeah.
right? Because it is valid trauma.
Yeah.
Not being able to talk about what you want sexually is traumatic. And so they'll come to me with that. And I notice that other couples, maybe that are part of the LGBTQ community, that are maybe, non-binary, depending on how they identify, have a little bit more awareness and more self-insight already. And they've already shed a lot of that, heteronormative perspective. So they're coming in thinking like,
Yeah.
maybe if it wasn't man, woman, period, what else could be wrong? So they're more open. And I wish that every couple that came to me were more open so that we could create safety for healing.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing. What are some practices that people can do when they first find out about infidelity?
I think, the first thing I do with them is really validate the trauma of it. Because no matter what we do to heal, whether we talk about ethical non-monogamy, whether we open, close, whatever that may be, we have to acknowledge that there has been hurt.
Yeah.
There has been trauma. And so several sessions are spent kind of validating that, really kind of nurturing that. So first and foremost, validate that this is going to be a painful process.
Wow. Yeah.
And then depending on what your partner is willing to bring to the table, right? If he or she or they validate that feeling, then we spend a little time healing that, having a conversation around, this wasn't done to you. It was done because of them, right? So it wasn't done to you. It was done because that person maybe didn't have the language, didn't have, as a Mexican woman, had that Catholic guilt of not being able to express their sexual needs.
Yeah.
And this applies to many cultures.
Yeah.
But there are stigmas there. And so that person might not have had the tools to express that. So getting rid of that, it's my fault, is step 2, right? Once we're able to get rid of not responsibility, but fault, then couples can truly start to look at, now that we're here, now what do we do with this?
Wow.
Does opening the relationship allow for healing? And I've seen so many times that it does.
Wow.
It keeps families intact. It heals, it saves. It's not traditional, I know, but I've seen it really help a lot of couples.
That's amazing. So then what is that process like? Like, do you offer your clients with like options of like, here's an open relationship option, here's something else? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. First, so a lot of the times, and people think therapy is about learning new skills. Well, they think it's venting, right? Which validly, but it's about learning. I think more importantly, though, it's about unlearning.
That's with good therapists, though, I gotta say.
About what?
Of like, I feel like I have heard so many stories. So people usually come to me after therapy.
Yeah, there's so much therapeutic trauma. Oh my gosh.
And I think what happens is, if you don't have a good therapist who understands that the more they continue to learn and expand their own mind and consciousness to a place like where you are at, where it's like understanding that maybe opening a relationship can really save, right? But I think there are certain therapists who come into the sessions with their preconceived judgments and their preconceived notions of what they believe is right and wrong, instead of putting that aside and just offering that safe space for their couples.
1000%. I think the idea of judgment-free zone sounds nice, but we have inherent biases. It's absolutely important to address those. And this is where we go back to community, right? I have so many friends who are therapists, and I'll call them and process and say, this was really challenging for me. What do you think came up? How can I get rid of that bias? So yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And listen, the idea of consensual or ethical non-monogamy, it's a non-traditional idea. Yeah. And so some therapists are really not willing to explore that. There's thousands of, beautiful, healthy therapists who are. Yes. But it's not traditional. So we have to unlearn right? Some of those traditional
Yeah.
inherent schemas that we were taught throughout our life. We were taught that you get married and that person is supposed to satisfy you forever, physically, emotionally, financially, right? Like my person. And I think it's so much more complex than that.
It is so much more complex than that.
Right.
Like, and I had to learn that the hard way when
Right.
I was, expecting my husband to show up for me in each and every single category.
Right.
And we were like so codependent. He was my like basically only best friend. I
Right.
had no other like support system. And I realized that that wasn't healthy at
Yeah.
all. Like, it's actually, ideally, it's the fantasy of, oh my gosh, my person is my everything. I can't imagine not being around them all the time. And I physically had to cut that cord when I chose to live in my own apartment
To support your relationship.
to support
To
my
support,
to
yeah.
to heal
To
our
grow,
relationship from an unhealthy attachment
Mm.
into a beautiful connection that we consciously are choosing
Right.
versus like, oh my gosh, I need him for survival, otherwise I'm gonna fucking die.
Right. Right.
So I had to put myself through that void of like attachment to anyone and anything.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is you put yourself in that vulnerable state of unknown and uncertainty in hopes that you could heal and grow and be better. Right?
Yeah, in hopes
that's a
that I
brave
can
thing.
just like be a whole human on my own
Right.
without like needing anyone.
Right.
But like choosing who I want
Yeah.
to have relationships with.
Right. And I'm sure it was scary at times, and I'm sure it was you
Oh
were
my God.
uncertain at times, and you're like, "Am I doing the right thing? Like
Oh my
this is
gosh.
madness."
I was crying like every day for like 3 months. I
Good.
was like,
Good.
yeah,
How
purging it
beautiful.
all
How
out.
beautiful that you cried for 3 months.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was important for me in order to, it's kind of like that caterpillar into a butterfly
Right.
moment, right? Like you need that death and rebirth if we're going to talk spiritual stuff, but like in order to transform into a new version of yourself and allow yourself to go into the depths of that darkness and face what's the reason behind it? Why
Right.
was I using my husband as this clutch? Why was I so hyper dependent on him?
Right.
What
Because you were
did I
taught
not
that.
receive
Right.
when I was growing up that now I'm trying to fill with
Right.
his love?
Yeah. And we learn by what we hear,
Yeah.
by what we see, right?
Yeah.
By nonverbal and verbal messages that we receive. So it sounds like you went through your whole, and I'm sure that your friends and family, some of them were probably caught off guard. And what are you doing? This is
Oh my
level.
God.
This
Yeah.
is
My
so
parents
insane.
are like, you're making the biggest mistake of your life.
Sure,
Like, of
sure.
course.
Yeah. But I think, unlearning all of those
Yeah.
schemas and all those ideas is so powerful because then you
Mhm.
almost have like a clean slate of, all right, if we've unlearned
Yeah.
man, woman, marriage, happiness, right? If we can shatter that
Yeah.
and really come in and think, what do I actually want for my life? There's so much power and so much freedom in that. And I think, unfortunately, society doesn't allow a lot of people, right? But
Yeah.
definitely pressure on women doesn't allow for that. Or men even, really, right?
Yeah.
They come in and they your wife is supposed to be everything, or your partner is supposed to be everything.
Or you're not supposed to be emotional. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
I read these
so
Reddit
many.
posts and they're like, I cried in front of my wife and now I'm so embarrassed. And I'm just like,
Oh, my heart.
yeah. And people in the comments are so nice and they're like, no, like your
Actually
wife probably
healthy,
loves
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, it's
But
okay.
even being able to say, like, non-traditionally, like, I have sexual wants or desires that maybe don't fall into conventional realm,
Yeah.
and hiding those, right? Suppressing those leads
Yeah.
to unhappiness. The divorce rate has surpassed what I think I read. It was like more than 60%.
Oh my goodness.
I think it went up past 50 something. I can't remember the
Yeah.
exact number, but more people are getting divorced, more people are getting hurt, injured, traumatized
Yeah.
because we're having to suppress our wants. And so, how beautiful is it to rise from a place of such pain when there's infidelity and be able to say, let's really take this as an opportunity to explore, what do you want?
And
What
how
makes you happy?
inspiring is that? You're literally like creating that beacon of hope for millions, if not billions, of people who have gone through the same situation.
Right.
Because infidelity is so common, which
So
sucks.
common.
It's so sad to say, but
It
it's
is.
so incredibly common. And that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
Right.
And the work that you do is so important because once we understand that it's not black and white
No.
and divorce isn't the only option, that's kind of what I do, right? With my platform is like
Sure.
the living apart. It's like, if you just need a freaking break from
Yeah.
your marriage to recenter, regroup,
Realign.
orient
Mhm.
like your life, and then without like needing to go through a separation or a divorce or all of
Right.
that. And it's like, if that is still what you choose, then go for it.
Of course. Not every relationship is meant to be kept or saved. There
Yeah.
are lots of different layers to this,
Yeah.
right? But if both partners have come in and said, listen, we love each other, we love our children, we love our home,
Yeah.
and we just feel that there's something missing here for us, then I work with them on either opening the relationship, right? And I do want to say there's a lot of very conscious soul searching and development of contracts that goes into it, right? Some people, when they hear ethical non-monogamy, they think, oh, they almost think it's the same as polyamory, right? You just kind of get to do what you want with who you want. That's not the case at all. There's a lot of thoughtful orientation and development of a contract that makes partners feel safe. There's so much safety in ethical non-monogamy, and people don't realize that.
What would you say is the biggest difference between ethical non-monogamy and
polyamory?
Yeah.
So polyamory is really having more than one partner, and you're committed to those partners, right? And there's so many nuances. It's not as simple as that.
Yeah.
But it's really like commitment to more than one partner. So you have maybe your spouse, and then maybe you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever term, but you're committed to all of those people equally, but with variations.
Yeah.
That's kind of the crash course, right?
Okay.
And then ethical non-monogamy is you have a primary relationship, right? And then you open it up to different partners. So based on what the couple decides, what they feel comfortable with together, and what parameters we put into it, right? Because there's rules and limitations, and you may not be comfortable with something your spouse may want, and then you have a conversation in therapy about that. Then you open it up to different experiences.
Wow.
Sexually, emotionally, whatever that looks like.
And then it sounds like, but the core relationship is still very much like
intact.
Yeah.
Oh, it's honored, it's respected, it's built up, it's the primary source of all of this, right? So a lot of the couples I work with are married and they have children. And so that core family for them, right, is the key. And they want to maintain that. And so we open up and we open up for periods, right? They'll say, let's open up for a month.
I love that.
And then sometimes one of the partners will say, I'm feeling a little more vulnerable. I'm feeling disconnected. Let's close it up. Let's close it up for a couple months and then we'll revisit. There's so much respect and love that isn't always there when we have to suppress our needs, our wants, our desires.
Yeah, I mean, that's when bitterness builds up, resentment builds up.
Right.
And then you're just creating these cracks in the foundation that don't need to be there, thinking that this person isn't going to love me if I'm honest, or, if I'm vulnerable, they may judge me. So, like, having that safe container that you're creating for them, I'm sure is, like, life-changing for their relationships, not only with each other, but I'm sure that ripple effect is caused through their friendships, their family dynamics, opening up that consciousness of, like, oh, my way is not the only way, or this way is not the only way, and just, like, black and white thinking, fixed mindset.
We have to shatter that, right? So many couples, too, they come in and they haven't even verbalized their sexual wants to each other.
Yeah.
I have a couple who's been married 22 years, and they have not been able to say to each other, this is what we want. They kind of we settle into what society thinks sexual satisfaction is, what society thinks, like, gender roles should be in regards to sexual connection. But they've never been able to say, listen, I want to try something non-conventional. Are you with me?
Yeah.
There's so much shame, so much stigma. So I find that in working with couples, we create a platform of unlearning, right? And then being open to, what do you really want? What's your kink? What's your fun? Where do you find pleasure and joy? And that always leads to emotional connection and cohesion.
How so?
So when you're able to trust and be vulnerable with your partner in saying, hey, I want to try this thing. Maybe society kind of frowns on it a little bit, but I think it's super fun.
Yeah.
There's so much healing in that, right? Because now you two have something that joins you, that connects you, something fun.
Us against the world.
Right. Now we're doing something, and you're also honoring my need.
Yeah.
Which is such a loving act.
Yeah.
Because maybe you think it's non-traditional, maybe you think it's a little strange at times, but you love and support me enough to try it with me. There's love in that.
There's so much love in that.
So much love in that.
I believe love is acceptance, like full radical acceptance of someone as they are right here, right now, and creating enough space for them to evolve and change and grow as they want and need. How often would you recommend couples, like whether they're healthy or whether they're going through something, to have these conversations?
I honestly wish that we could normalize the idea of coming to therapy when there isn't something wrong. I think It's getting better. It's getting a lot better. But I do think a lot of couples come by the time there's a lot of hurt and wounding. And so a lot of my work is repair work.
Yeah.
And then we go into, like, okay, now that we've really established a little foundation of trust, what do you both need? I have them do a needs statement. These are traditional, not traditional in the heteronormative way, but couples who don't come in for infidelity. we have them do a need statement, right? I have them write down, what are your top 10 needs? Have you ever sat with each other and said this?
Yeah.
And then I have them swap it and write down, now how can you meet your partner's needs?
Oh, I love
right? Because I always say, are you asking your partner to meet your needs or anticipate them? And so
what's the difference?
So we often, right? Well, I don't want to say people, unfortunately, often are shaped into thinking that they should have their partner anticipate their needs, right? Instead of being responsible for verbalizing them. Telling your partner very specifically, hey, I'm feeling disconnected. Can you plan an overnight trip for us in the next month and let me know how I can contribute, but I want you to take the lead. Or I'm feeling very disconnected. Can we sit together on the couch on Friday, watch a movie, and then go to brunch on Saturday? Really specifically asking for what you need. Partners will live in, well, it's their turn to plan a date night, and why should I do it? And that causes resentment and dissatisfaction.
Yeah. On the contrary, like the number one thing that I hear is I tried to have this conversation and then my partner gets defensive. Right. So how do we break through that defense?
Right. So valid. But that's why initially we have to build that foundation of trust. We have to come in and really let go of ego. And so that, going back to your original question, that's why I wish couples would come in, not just when something is hurt or broken, but when they're healthy, so that we can say, how do you listen without ego? How do you validate without ego? How do you come in and really create a space for what can we do to help each other feel satisfied in this relationship? Yeah. So you have to do that prep work. And once you do that prep work, that healing, then you can come in and ask your partner to meet your needs. Yeah. But there's so much silence, right? So many relationships, and I've had this happen, relationships are lost because of what you don't say versus what you do say. And it'll shatter it. So taking that responsibility of, I need to verbalize some of this, like. But every time you do, right? Don't you feel like it's so scary where you have to risk losing this person in order to simply speak your truth? Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean? Lose this person? Like, I think that's why so many people, myself included, when I first felt the need to move into my own apartment or like have space away, it's like, one, I don't want him thinking that I love him any less. So, I don't want him to feel abandoned and neglected and all those things. Two, what if this is just so out there and he thinks I'm like incapable of being a wife? And he may just say, well, no, I'd rather get a divorce, Right. So and I think like anytime someone wants to have a conversation of opening up things and like going there and being unconventional and having something that is so non-traditional, you're always going to risk rejection, whether it's you being rejected or them feeling rejected, that they're not enough or whatever. And don't you think that every relationship is a risk? Every single day we risk. Every single day when we are vulnerable and we say, I love you and I hope that you love me back, that's a vulnerability. Yeah. So the idea of risk, we're in risk just by loving someone. So I think, again, unlearning that this is dangerous, right? Learning that like, I am safe. Yeah. And again, before I even set out and develop a contract with couples, if there's infidelity, we heal. And if there is an infidelity and they just want to open up, we work on establishing that you're safe. An argument doesn't mean your partner's leaving, right? A huge fight, whether it's productive or unproductive, doesn't mean that they're leaving. Doesn't mean that you're going to be abandoned. And so we work through that. And some of it is individual therapy. Yeah. Because we bring our childhood and our past into our current relationship. It's there. And the models that we grew up seeing. 1000%. So shattering those and saying like, listen, we're safe here. Yeah. We're safe to say, I want to talk about opening up. It doesn't mean that we are going to, but I'm curious about it. And I want Norma to give us more info. I want Sana to give us more info. It's just. And permission to go there. Permission, safety to go there. So I always work on, do you feel safe in your relationship? And if you don't, what do we need to do in order to feel safe? Because we cannot develop a contract where I'm talking about, how many times you can have sex with someone new, where can you meet them, what sexual behaviors you're going to engage in or not engage in without safety. Yeah. Because then there is injury. So true. Yeah. But really it's about creating that safety and that contract. Yeah. The contract is key to ethical non-monogamy. Without the contract, I think a lot of people struggle and do get re-injured and hurt. Yeah. Have you seen that happen? Yeah. Couples come to me. So, I specialize in this type of work, but couples come to me sometimes after having tried it on their own, right? Because they think, well, why would I, spend money to see someone if we can just kind of talk about it? So they try it on their own. And the parameters aren't
messy.
there, it's messy. It's messy because, you know,
two emotionally charged beings trying to have a conversation
Right.
without any tools
Right.
and, you know, any like foundational things. Like, I mean, I give people tools like set a timer on the clock for 2 minutes and then
Right.
pause and
Right.
for 1 minute, and then the other person goes for 2 minutes. So things like that help when you are alone. But if you don't
Sure.
even have that and you're just trying to have a conversation with somebody, your ego gets in the way, your wounding gets in the way, your trauma gets in the way, your programming gets in the way, and then
Right.
you're not really having a conversation at all.
No. You're bringing the past in with you. And I think, like you said, being there, so right when you're with your couples and working with them on having an unbiased person that really kind of can help pull the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
Because developing this contract has to be, of course, there's some emotion, right?
Of course.
But it can't be a solution to the infidelity, right? It can't be a solution to the hurt. It has to be something that is added to it to grow from, to build from.
Oh, wow.
So you heal first, you talk about feelings first, and then once that's settled, then you can come in and be specific about what you need.
Yeah.
So you have to have that unbiased person. So when they first come in, they've tried it on their own. Yeah, it's gotten very messy, right? People will often fall in love with the person that they're, you know, engaging in behaviors with and exploring non-traditional sexual behaviors with. So we really have to pull back and set a lot of parameters for safety because, again, honoring the relationship is key.
Yeah. What are some ways that people can build safety in their relationships?
I think that it sounds easy, but it's very hard to do. But brutal honesty is really key, right? Again, I want to reiterate, I've experienced it. I see it all the time in couples. You know, we have more conflict from what we don't say than what we do say. And so talking to your partner first and foremost about how you communicate. Do we feel safe communicating with each other? If not, let's address that.
Yeah.
And then once there is safety in communicating, talking it through, maybe there's 2 things I do with couples that really, really help. So choosing a time where you will sit and talk. I've done it in my own relationships. I recommend it to couples, and it's really like it's so safe and so beautiful. So saying, hey, every Sunday morning we're going to make a coffee. We're going to be in our PJs, like hair up in a bun, really just kind of messy morning. But we're going to talk about our needs for 30 minutes. We're going to talk about what we want. Creating that safe bubble conditions your brain, right? Because we're creatures of habit. Conditions your brain. Even if you have a conflict on a Wednesday, you go, oh, but we're going to sit together on Sunday and we're going to talk about things. So I'll bring it up then.
I do something similar where I say light a candle that you love the scent of. So it like already is like creating an environment of love and safety.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Honestly, that is, because we're also very triggered by smell, right? Smell is the number one trigger for memory. And so being able to have that, and that's almost like symbolically a sense of safety. So creating a habit of sitting on the couch together and for X amount of minutes and talking about your needs or talking about your relationship is key. And this isn't where we talk about whether, you know, the kids have soccer practice or whether, you know, your mother-in-law's coming or your best friend is having an issue. This is where you talk about your own needs. Yeah. So that's one. The other thing I do with couples that works really well if they don't feel comfortable or safe communicating is I have them buy a notebook, a blank notebook, and I have one partner commit to starting, and they write something that they've been afraid or unsafe in saying. Then they text their partner, hey, I wrote in the notebook, take your time with it, text me when you're done.
Wow.
And I often find that there's so much vulnerability in doing that, but also so much more gets said.
Yes.
Because A, your brain loves to write, right? To all my Gen Zs, I know we love our cell phones. Trust me, I'm with you.
Yeah.
But there's something to putting pen to paper.
It has saved me. It's gotten me like to access my subconscious in a way that I can't. Yeah. 100%. I'm a huge believer in journaling. Is like the 1,000% most healing for me.
1,000%. Because our brain, so I could go on about this for hours, but there's also something, we do EMDR, trauma therapy, right? Because it distracts our brain and helps our brain kind of reprocess traumatic memories.
Yeah.
Same thing. When we are writing, our brain is almost like at a subconscious level and it taps into things we can't normally tap into. So I have seen this activity work wonders if both participants are willing to, because sometimes one isn't and it causes a lot of hurt.
Yeah, no, I'm going to try it because I've never done that like with my partner.
Oh, it's so great. Really, it's super healing. So then you text them and you're like, hey, I wrote in the journal. And then they go in and really, it gets to be really fun. When we get to a place of healing, I'll tell them, write down a fantasy.
Exactly.
Write down something that you can't say to your partner that you've always wanted to try.
I mean, leave a dirty message.
Right.
You know, and like a new way to connect and be intimate. And yeah, I mean, we're so married. We're not going to be sending nudes anymore. You know what I mean? So it's
listen, I'm a proponent for sending a nude every once in a while. Send your spouse a nude.
All right, I'll do that too.
Your husband's going to love this.
I'll put a little nude Polaroid on the thing with the little dirty message.
Please. But listen, that's the
I like
reality,
that.
right?
Yeah.
The reality is like we put so much effort into dating. You pick your lingerie, you pick like you send nudes, you figure out fantasies, you do exciting things.
Yeah.
And then we stop. And
I always say love isn't hard, life just makes it hard. Like life gets in the way. When you're dating, you don't have as many life obligations
1000%
in that relationship. So
and I want to empower couples in kind of normalizing that sometimes it's not easy, right? I say, again, these things, I say them like they're easy, but they do take work and they do take cognizant effort. But that notebook is really nice because it doesn't put a time constraint on it. It's just like when you have time, write in it. It's in our nightstand. It's, it's at my house. It's at your house if we live apart, whatever it may be. But it's a really beautiful space to say, hey, you hurt me yesterday. Or, I want to have sex in the shower. It's not something we traditionally do. Like whatever it is that I want to go to a leather party, whatever.
Yeah.
It really creates a sense of safety for anything that you can't say, and couples really, really love it.
And what a beautiful little, memorabilia to have when you're, 80 and you're on your rocking chairs and you're like, remember how hard it was when we were going through this? And you have that as a memory.
Yeah. And I will say that, so what I've seen historically with couples is it starts hard, and then they start to look forward to it.
Yeah.
Like, what did they write in this notebook? Like, what are we doing? What are we feeling?
Yeah.
And so if we can't communicate verbally, or again, because we're taught these really damaging stereotypes that, you're not supposed to talk dirty to your partner. You're not supposed to ask for your needs to be met. Like, heaven forbid a woman talks about her own pleasure and what that looks like.
Yeah.
We are penalized, stigmatized. We are told we are going to hell.
Yeah.
Right? There's so, what?
Which is ridiculous because the kingdom of heaven is through a woman's vagina, just saying.
Correct.
But,
Like 1000%. Also, tell me that we're not supposed to have pleasure, but yet we have pleasure organs.
Which is so crazy. I mean, life comes through our vagina. It's like, it's just like, life is born because of that intimate act. It's like the most sacred thing you can do.
Right. And science and nature, and we eradicate things we no longer need, right? I always tell people you still have tear ducts, so you're meant to cry. We still have reproductive pleasure, so we're still able to feel joy and pleasure with each other and ourselves. Yeah. Right? So explore that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that you said self too. That's something that I've been really practicing in this new stage of life that I'm in, which is reclaiming that my body is mine. Mm-hmm. My choices are mine. So for instance, it started with me choosing to get off birth control. And it's like, hey, I understand that this affects you, to my husband.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, this is kind of in a very loving way to myself, my body is mine.
Right.
And I get to make my choices, even though it's slightly inconvenient for him now that I'm off birth control.
Of course.
The self-pleasure. I am allowing myself to just fully embrace my full body on my own. And honestly, it's unlocking things in me that I when I'm in bed, I'm thinking with him oh, this is for a result.
Yes.
For an end destination.
Sure.
Versus when I'm alone, I'm having a completely unique, intimate experience with my body.
1000%.
So it's been so healing for me to reclaim my womanhood and that I belong to me, as cliche as that is.
No, that's beautiful. Genuinely, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I also there's so much stigma too, especially when we talk about infidelity. So many couples will come to me and masturbation is off the table, right? Self-exploration, self-love, self-pleasure is off the table because there's so much threat and so much hurt. So I work a lot with pornography, right? Right. Listen, pornography addiction is absolutely valid, right? Yeah. That's a valid behavioral, change that needs to happen for some people.
Agreed.
But a lot of the times we are taught that just watching pornography is something quote unquote bad. And so there isn't a lot of space for, what do you have that conversation with your partner? What does your partner enjoy watching? What does your partner enjoy doing if you feel comfortable? But they come in,
watch it together.
Yeah. Right. But there's so much stigma and really just guilt and shame, right? So do you know the difference between guilt and shame?
No, please tell me.
So guilt is I did, and I'm going to use good and bad, even though I hate those words because nothing is good or bad. We're not absolute. Okay. So guilt is I did something bad. Mm-hmm. Shame is I am bad. Right? And so a lot of people come in with, because I love guilt. Guilt will actually lead you to accountability, to apologizing, to wanting to do better, to change. Guilt is a motivator. Feel guilty about hurting someone's feelings? I'm going to take accountability, call them, apologize. If I feel shame about it, all that's going to do is put me in a spiral where I feel bad about myself, and I'm going to go engage in some other self-destructive behavior. So a lot of people come in with shame surrounding sex.
Mm.
I am a bad person because I want to watch this type of pornography, or because I self-pleasure. I've been taught that that's bad, right? Like we tell children, like, don't touch yourself, like don't do that.
Which is so crazy.
Oh my gosh, it's innate. Like, stop.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously there are parameters, right? I'm not going to have a 3-year-old touching themselves,
in a
Target.
classroom. Right, exactly.
But we want to make sure that we normalize it. Like,
well, that's the thing, that educate them on where it's okay
Right.
and where it's not.
but normalizing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that I do is really unlearning that guilt and shame.
Yeah.
You are not a bad person for
That
wanting
is
some
layered. It is so layered.
So a lot of really like complex work, but when we get them out of that shame, oh my God, people change. Literally, it's like I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, people change.
Yeah.
Because we're not meant to carry so much shame.
No.
There's joy and connection
Yeah.
in our sexual pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So ridding yourself of that, and like, sure, feel guilty if you, watch pornography and your partner wanted to have sex and you chose not to. Some guilt, sure, but also like support yourself and embrace yourself. And in that moment, maybe you wanted to spend time in your own pleasure and not in partner pleasure, and that's okay too.
And I love that you say that, because it's like, at first it's like, I mean, I still feel it sometimes, where it's like, oh, should I just be like having sex with him instead?
Right.
And it's like, am I taking away from that? But I'm not at all.
Right.
I'm literally just, I could do it all. I could do that and that,
Right.
Like, as women, we are lucky that we can keep going as much as we want. Yeah, it's just about letting go of that this or that mindset. Again, comes back to that over and over again, where it's like, just because you are doing this doesn't mean you don't enjoy that.
Right. And I will say, so the way we measure, and without looking at like sexual addiction or sexual unhealthy behavior, is measured by whether it causes functional impairment to your daily life. So someone will have a glass of wine, it's fine.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem when it causes functional impairment to your daily life. So,
I love that. Yeah.
So the same for sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to explore the things you want as long as it's healthy and it's not causing you damage in your work, your marriage, yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So really allowing, like, it's not causing impairment to my life, so I'm allowed and I'm empowered enough to explore what I want and also what my partner wants.
Yeah. And I think that religion was created because everything was so free-flowing. And I think it was like, kind of like why feminism was started, and it went all the way to the other side of...
So oppressive.
Right? So, but I think that in order to have change in a collective society, it has to go to an extreme and then find the balance. So I think now we're evolving past religion. We're evolving past the feminist movement in a completely new way. And I think as millennials, we are the first generation to have access to the internet for the first time and seeing all of these different walks of life, and then deciding what we want and what we don't by simply paying attention to the emotions that we have when we see other people doing things that are unconventional.
Right.
And, I think that it's our responsibility as Gen X, millennials, Gen Z to open up that dialogue.
1000%.
And move past all of these rules and restrictions that we created.
And also, like, and as a gift to the women and people who came before us, right?
Yeah.
Who paved the way, who weren't able to do that.
We wouldn't be here without that.
No. My mother, she's very traditional. She's in her 70s. She's very traditional. My father is very open and just fun and joyous, but
it's usually the opposite.
I know,
so that's
it's so
really
funny.
Interesting.
It's so funny. Yeah. She's just, she's very, very liberal. Both of them are very liberal, but she comes in like more like, when I told her I was doing this podcast, she's like, why do you talk about these things? And I'm like, because we need to hear it, Mom. And so my dad was like, good for you, great job. But I think like really kind of honoring that, even though she doesn't understand, right, a lot of the work that I do and the things that I say, she's still behind me, empowering me, and kind of saying like, go, fly, do what you need to do.
You're so lucky.
So right.
Oof.
And that's not traditional in Mexican culture, right? Mexican culture is usually the opposite of that.
I mean, immigrant households in general.
1000%. I speak from my own experience, but 1000% immigrant or people of color in general have been taught kind of these like oppressive, damaging stereotypes. And so honoring those women who maybe, didn't have their own voice, right? But were cognizant enough and loving enough to give it to us. I think I'm healing generations.
100%.
And I hope that whoever comes next, whether I have children or not, I hope that generation
takes the baton and takes it to the next step.
1000%, right? We have to keep pushing those boundaries because religion and society has created so much damage already. It's our job. It's our responsibility.
I think it's absolutely wild that we still hold so much value over these things that were existed a million years ago.
Right. And if you look at really sexual behavior, right, on cave walls,
Yes.
We weren't that
I'm like Kama Sutra, like come
right.
on.
I mean, all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, go to a museum in Italy and like look at art from back in the day, right? It just, civilization was so much more free. But we really do need to
So
honor
true.
the work that these women have done, really break those stereotypes, and like it's healing for us and it's healing for them, whether they're around or not.
I agree 100%. I always say like my simply having the choice to have kids or not is
So
a
powerful.
gift
Oh yeah.
that I have now. And like I think about my ancestors all the time when I'm thinking, when I get that pressure, right? Like, oh, when are you having kids? Why aren't you having kids? You've
All
been
the
married
time.
for 9 years. When are you having kids? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I just don't have the desire
Right.
to.
Right. Valid. Also, could you imagine if we came to them and asked about their life choices in any other way? What are you switching your car? What's your car's ugly? Get a new car. Like, what's wrong with your car? Are you buying a new car?
So
Every time you
true.
saw them, right? Your job sucks. Get a new job. What are you
Yeah.
doing? It would seem so judgmental and so rude.
So true.
But
Never
yet,
thought about it that way, but yeah.
but yet people think, I mean, about anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you wearing those pants? What's wrong with your pants? And yet people think you can come and talk about my body and my life choice.
Yeah.
It's wild to me.
It is wild.
Right. My
Yeah.
mom is, so this is, she's actually gotten to a place where people will say, like, well, you don't have grandchildren. What about your daughter? She doesn't have kids. And she'll start saying, well, she has a master's degree and she has a practice. And so she's just kind of like started defending herself. And it's sad because they have to defend themselves too.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of pressure. Like, you're not a grandparent, but it's really just
So
rude.
true.
And we can have fulfillment and accomplishment in other ways.
So many other ways. I
So
mean,
many other ways. I am honored and genuinely privileged. I say I can't believe
Yeah.
I get paid to be a therapist. Like, I love the work I do. I love my clients.
same.
I feel so fulfilled.
I mean, I'm not a therapist, but yeah, same.
No, but
Helping
same.
people, yeah.
No, but same. You're helping people.
Yeah.
Like,
I love it so much.
right. Like, there's space for all of us,
Yeah,
right?
every day I'm just like, I can't believe I get paid to do this work. It's
1,000,000%.
Yeah. I mean, I also come from a corporate background where I was miserable at work and I finally get to do things that I actually want to do. And
yeah.
especially like without having the license, right? That was a block for me for a really long time. It was like,
Mm.
oh, you don't have the credentials and who's going to trust you? Who's going to believe you? And this and that. And I was just like, oh, let me just try and see what happens.
Right.
And like, I know I am gifted here. I know I can do it. I know I can help.
I think it's so powerful. And I love that you do that. And I think like anybody who has a voice that's healing and supportive, you know, obviously you have lived experience. And so you can share some knowledge. You're not doing trauma work. You're not, you know, some trauma work, but not, you know, deep-seated trauma work. And so there's space for all of us. That idea of like only here is just, I don't think it's needed anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Of
sharing your gifts
course.
and your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having
This
me.
has been so fun.
Yeah.
How can my audience find you and connect with you if they are looking to work with you?
So I will link my website through your podcast.
Yes.
So links will be added, I think, soon.
In the show notes, yeah.
Sure, in the show notes. And I'm hosting a couples therapy workshop. It starts August 3rd. It's very, very small. I host them every few months. They're very small, only 6 couples.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about, you know, how to heal. We talk about infidelity. We talk about there's a little bit of conversation about ethical non-monogamy, but mostly we talk about what couples need in order to thrive and really be successful. So I will link the page for that. It's on my website, and anybody who wants to connect with me for individual or group is welcome.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet.
Thank you so much.